Welcome back to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Olewa. And my next guest is the Senior Vice President of Business Development for Waypoint, the premier North American food service sales and marketing solutions agency. Prior to this role, she served as Vice President for Waypoint for national sales, and she also did National Sales Director for French's Food Company, and she was a sales manager for Brown, Moore, and Flint. So I went a little back, as you can tell, Julie, just to get some information on you. But she's had an incredible career, and we're going to learn more about that in a moment here. I should note she's a family friend of a dear friend of mine, Francesca, and just our talk prior to this interview just made me so excited about being able to get some time with you and to be able to get your insights on just all things that whatever comes up in our conversation, along with hearing a little bit about your best worst thing down the line. Welcome, Julie Swift.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I didn't realize you were going to go creeping on me.
Yes, I've had to admit in the past. I mean, some say it's creeping, some say it's sleuthing. You know, tomato, whatever. Anyway, well, I appreciate you spending this time with. I know this is quite a busy time for everybody, and with all the changes that are happening around the world, time is really valuable. And so I really appreciate your time. So I really want to get us started with talking about your incredible career. So if you can tell the listeners a little bit more about your current role and what does this look like at Waypoint?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. My current role at Waypoint in business development is really all about bringing added value to current clients and also just maybe expanding the portfolio to include other clients. So it's 100 miles an hour, 7 days a week, and I've never had more fun.
Fantastic. So how did you get into this industry? What was kind of your career path? Is this something you always knew you were going to get into? I assume that a lot of people don't necessarily land where they thought they were growing up. So what was your kind of career trajectory? How did you get to this point?
I'm really glad you asked me that question. I have never been in any industry except for the food industry. I started there. I'll definitely finish there. And it's because of my passion for the food industry. So the first part of that, you mentioned Brown, Moore, and Flint. Before that, I actually worked in my father's grocery store business. So my dad was also a foodie from the beginning, and he worked for kind of the corporate America chains that you might recognize some of those names. And then he eventually decided to kind of go out on his own, hang his own shingle. And so he was our hometown grocery store. So I really started out in the food industry working for Winn-Dixie, and, right out of high school, went in, had stars in my eyes about everything I was going to accomplish, saw myself as a store director and a regional and all kinds of things, probably in an era where not very many women made it to that level. So I started out there and kind of worked my way up. I decided after having worked for my dad for a number of years that I really wanted to get in more hands-on selling. So I went to work for Brown, Moore, and Flint, which back then was a regional food broker on the retail side. So we called on Minyards and Kroger's and that sort of thing. So I started out at the bottom rung. I worked my way up into marketing and eventually sales leadership. And that's where I really tested the mettle for, just the impact of influencing people, both on the receiving end of a sale as well as developing people to really bring customers true value through listening and bringing solutions, and worry about the sale, somewhere down the road. The sale will eventually come if you can solve a customer's needs. So I think that's where I really sort of honed in this sixth sense about what customers really need and how you forge those relationships that in some cases are relationships I still have. So that's kind of where it all started. I got kind of going that way and realized that, as we represented these different clients as a food broker, it got me thinking that, gosh, I'd like to be one of those clients. I think I'm on the wrong end, the receiving end of all the orders. I want to be on the giving end of the orders,
Oh, yeah.
So I went to work for the French's Food Company, and that's actually where I transitioned into the food service business, and where I still am today in the food service business, just in terms of that entire industry. And from there, I moved over to Waypoint. So all this time, probably somewhere around 30 years, been in the food service industry, about 10 or 12 years of that in marketing and marketing leadership, and the rest has really been sales and business development.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's incredible that you've been able to have a 30-year career in the same industry. I know with such a small world that we have now, a lot of people are looking for constant changes. And so you mentioned something about having a passion for it. And so, I've heard of some takes on passion as the idea that, you have to do what you want, that's you're passionate about. And then there's other arguments that passion can grow. It sounds like you kind of found your early passion, which led you down a certain path. Were there certain experiences that really influenced how you moved into sales? You mentioned, you were on one side of things and then you kind of transitioned to the other side of things. But were there any certain experiences that helped you guide your way throughout this particular industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there were probably several defining moments where I either thought, gosh, this is the direction I should be going, or this isn't the direction I should be going. And I would say the last few years that I spent in marketing, I found myself looking at it as pure sales instead of marketing. So it was kind of like, gosh, let me get in the head of the recipient of what we're creating here. Let me think like they do. Let me put myself, walk a mile in their moccasins and really understand what it is they're up against every day, instead of thinking about features and benefits of products. And I have to say, I had the absolute, honor and privilege of working with some of the biggest brands, Frank's Red Hot. What a fun brand, right?
Yeah.
French's Mustard, some of these products that these iconic brands that are all about Americana and that are all about fun experiences and traditions and all of those kinds of things. But I found myself, instead of like doing the normal thing of like, okay, here are the features and benefits and all of that, it was like, no, tell me about what keeps you up at night. Tell me about what problem are you trying to solve? And in food service, and gosh, not to digress too far, Josh, but it's like right now is a pain moment in the food service industry. I mean, it is like nothing I've ever seen in my lifetime, and I'm sure a lot of other people would say the same. But I have never seen a more resilient and innovative and, I guess, almost family-like industry. And so if you think about that for a moment, and you think about the way you might position yourself as a company, as a marketer, as, a seller. We had salespeople I'm inspired by that were actually out helping operators at the beginning of the pandemic set up their Facebook pages, because the consumer now had all this reliance on social media and Google search and all of this. And some food service operators are, the same guys that puts the key in the door and opens it in the morning, the same, woman who walks across the back of the house figuring out what needs to happen in inventory is the same person who's dragging a mop at the end of the day,
right,
and, adjusting the dining area for the next day. These people had to change on a dime, and they had to transition to a totally takeout environment. They had to change everything, including the menu. They had to put sanitation practices in place that were changing every day. The CDC was like masks, no masks. They were like hand sanitizer, no hand sanitizer. I mean, it was just insane, everything that was coming at them. And at the same time, think about, where do you do the majority of your celebrating? Where do you celebrate that promotion? Where is your special place that you go for date night? So you think about that, I'm like, man, all of this emotion that is wrapped up in that. So, not to give you a commercial for Waypoint at all, but it was really just the idea of, let's all put on, let's all put on our battle gear and let's get in here with these food service operators and give them whatever it is they need. We didn't care if it was a line we didn't represent. We connected them to it anyway. We didn't care if we didn't sell gloves. We connected it, we didn't care if we're not social media experts. If we know how to log in, set up a site, we're going to be over here helping you do it. And that is almost like, look, passion is something that it doesn't grow without being stoked. The stoke to my passion is the people. And, just seeing the importance of the restaurant, the importance of that food service operator maybe has their life savings in it. So it's like, I feel like at every step of my career, there's been this passion that has sort of propelled it to this next level. And what do we really create and what do we really do when we're really, really focused in on the customer, on the receiver, and we're representing clients who are depending on us to figure that out and to do it for them. So sorry for the Sermon on the Mount there, but it truly is something that I believe passion is within, but I also believe that it's like, man, there's fuel that you can pick up along the way just by tapping into the needs of others and tapping into the, gifts that others have to help bring that along. So major collaboration when everybody gets together and they all start pulling in the same direction. The power of that is just magnificent.
Well, it sounds like you have a great team. And I'm also hearing the passion for people, right? Passion for customers, passion for clients, the ability to really put your energy in that direction and meet those needs, even to the point where you're even able to connect them with resources outside of your purview, outside of what Waypoint offers, which is an incredible thing, which speaks to you, which speaks to the company you work for, which is really amazing. I also love this idea about the idea of developing the customer and influencing connected to developing, but it doesn't sound like it's influencing in terms of trying to convince or trick somebody into, buying a product. It really sounds like trying to understand what the customer's needs are, trying to understand what the client's needs are, and then figuring out if you have something that meets that need and being able to share that with somebody. So I push students on this a lot, this idea of, you're not trying to sell yourself. What you're trying to do is you're trying to share. You have something to offer. They have something really good too that they need, that they want. And so you're trying to match the two up. And I think when you put the client first, a lot of really special things can happen. It sounds like that's really your approach to this.
Totally it is. You hit it right on the money. The responsibility of representing our clients to the customer, we take it really, really seriously. And we do it with a lot of passion. It's almost like somebody comes along and they trust you with their child to raise. It's like, here's my brand, here is my business. I'm going to trust you to represent me in the best way possible that you can. I'm going to trust you to do right by my business. And so you have that responsibility over here. On the other side of it, you have the food service operator who, you build the relationship, who trusts you to say, bring me things that will help me grow my business. Teach me, bring me trends. Right now, I was reading this fact a couple of days ago. 82% of my customer base is starving for menu trends and insights right now because of the critical shape that food service is in. So I can raise my hand and say, hey, you know what? I'm partnered with people who can help me do that and help me deliver it. So much so that we've trained 500 salespeople plus on how to use these tools so that when you are on a call like this and you're looking face to face, or you're on a phone call, or you're on a text message on your phone, or whatever it might be, it's like, hey, you have access to that and you can deliver it. And honestly, none of that really has much to do with what brand am I going to sell you today? What product am I going to sell you today?
That's right.
Let me tell you, it all comes when you can line up that operator's need with something that you can provide. And, I think of lots of times through my career where I can remember my boss saying, gosh, you just went in here and spent a half a day with these people. You brought in culinary resources and, you worked on desserts all day. And, I'm scratching my head, but I don't remember the last time we put mustard or hot sauce in a dessert. And, what I remember telling my boss at that time was it took me 6 months to get an appointment. The day I walked in with our chef, their kitchen was on fire. They were up against a deadline and said, "I'm sorry, we're going to have to reschedule." And I said, "What can we do to help?" And you roll up your sleeves. And, the chef is looking at me like, "I'm loving this. I love working with dessert." But at the end of the day, that's how we forged the relationship, is that you had a need. I got the people I can't do anything other than wash dishes, but I washed dishes that day and put the chef on the front line.
That's incredible. I was just talking to one of my team members today about this idea of being a contribution. She was giving me a story about how she had a particular need, and as she was assisting with a student, that student ended up turning around and being able to support her in some personal needs with tutoring and mentoring her daughter. And I just thought, what an amazing example. And I think that last example you just gave right now, this idea of, relationships, being able to step and roll your sleeves up, do dishes if you need to, it doesn't matter what your title is. But your willingness to serve just for service sake alone is really huge. And the payoff on that investment always for me has been consistently at least equal, if not more. When I'm willing to kind of connect with people and make a contribution in time and service and maybe even just a listening ear, it means so much. I think Daniel Pink or somebody said this. I listen to a lot of content when they talk about all things are sales. And when I think about sales, I do think about you're not trying to convince somebody of your product. You're really trying to, you should believe in whatever it is that you have to offer. And then you're trying to make a connection with them because you think they can truly benefit from it. And such a full experience I've had personally in my previous roles of having to sell. In my case, it's academics. When I'm able to make that connection, and it just makes it an easier conversation. Plus, honestly, I'm genuinely interested in relationships, and you seem like that type of person as well. That's warm and smart and intelligent, and just also just really socially smart as well, and able to connect with people because you understand people. And so that's incredible. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from taking that approach. It doesn't have to be always self-focused. The idea of switching that around and really being outwardly focused towards the people that you're trying to work with, that you're trying to serve, or even that you're trying to do business with, which is really incredible. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to pivot a little bit as well here, and I want to find out more. You mentioned your dad earlier, and him being in the food industry in a grocery store, and so I just want to kind of take it back a little further than that and find out from you where are you from, kind of a little bit about your upbringing, and if whatever else you'd like to share about your family, et cetera.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. You mean to tell me you can't tell from my accent where I'm from?
I'm not that good. I'm all right.
Yeah, most of the time people will say, we'll get on Zoom meetings now and we'll be like, where are you? Where are you? I'm in Springfield, Missouri. And then they'll kind of go, I don't know if that accent is no, I'm from Fort Worth, Texas.
Excellent.
So that is where I'm from. I'm from Fort Worth. I grew up in small town America, probably somewhere between The Sandlot and Friday Night Lights. If you were to merge those two together, that was us. I mean, we tore out of the house in the summer, in the morning, and, none of us had the equipment to, really, play baseball or football or volleyball or whatever game, but we rigged something up that made it work. And it was really a great place to grow up. I'm one of 3 girls, and my parents very forward thinking in equality of all kinds. My dad, the ultimate feminist, absolutely. Never really knew until I got in the workplace that there were a lot of people walking around thinking that women couldn't do the same jobs that men did, or that just all the biases that are built in across the spectrum. I wasn't really raised that way, but obviously, just a dad that thinks that way and that raises you that way. And then you kind of learn as you get out into the world, the cold, hard facts of the world, is especially in the generation that I'm in and coming into the workforce at the moment that I did in time. There were not as many women working outside the home as there are today. And it was just a real different trajectory. But certainly that upbringing and having a dad that saw all people of all kinds as equal, I'm so very grateful for that. I'm just thankful for it.
That's amazing. He sounds like just an incredible human being. I think it's tough, as you try to shelter your kids from, the harsh realities that we have to deal with as adults, and you try to help them, raise them with a strong sense of self-efficacy and empowerment, knowing that around the corner they're going to have to come across some really harsh realities. And in the start of your career, I know you mentioned this earlier too as well, at the time that you really thought about moving up in the food industry and kind of advancing your career, it was not like you had a whole lot of role models who were women who were doing similar work. And so I'm curious for you, as you take the fortifying of your upbringing and just the empowerment that your dad and I'm assuming others provided for you, what was the connecting point once you got to that point in your career to go ahead and go for those higher level positions and to continue to advance? What pushed you along?
Josh, everybody's got a story that is probably a little bit of a negative story that propelled them to the next level. And I happen to be one of those people that do. I worked for a district manager that I wanted to get into the leadership program at the company that I was at. And so I went to the district manager. I went to my immediate manager first, and he was like, oh, you got to talk to this guy. So I went to the district manager and I said, hey, I'd really like to move up in the organization, and I'd like to eventually run a store and eventually be a district manager like you are. And I can remember to this day him sort of sitting back in his chair and crossing his arms and looking at me and said, well, we have to put you on the night stock crew. I said, sign me up. You mean you would work on the night stock crew for like 6 months? Look, if that's part of the management training program, absolutely I would. I said, well, Julie, how many sentences start out like that? Mm-hmm. Julie, we don't really put women in training. They get pregnant. Wow. When I tell people, and you and I are on video with each other, but I just saw your reaction. And when I tell people that story, they're just like, and so, I will honestly say that absolutely made me realize that, number one, I needed to change companies. But number two, that I might end up being this guy's boss one day.
Yes.
So hopefully along the way somewhere he's learned differently.
Yeah, when you come across those gatekeepers in your career, it can be really challenging to not take it so personal. And I've certainly feel like I've come across my share of them for a whole host of reasons. People who say, we don't do this, or they just don't see you in that particular position based on identity or experience or youth at some point, or maybe you're too old at some point. And it's really hard. But I love how you switched it around and you thought about two things. One is I have to move on. Like this company, this person represents this company and his value system is not going to really align too well with mine moving forward. Okay. So it's time for me to start looking for something else. But the other piece of saying, I'm not going to let him stop me, and I'm not going to let this stop me. And I think that ability to do that is, quite frankly, really a lot of what inspired this podcast and what this is all about, which is being able to push through a lot of those hurdles and stumbling blocks, even if it's a person or a life experience. So I just want to give you kudos on everything you shared, but in particular, just the strength that you've had to be able to continue to persist throughout, what seemingly and obviously is unfair circumstances. And I think that the people around you, we talked about this before, but I believe that the people around you are benefiting from this. Some of the work that you do with diversity and equity and inclusion at your company sounds really impressive. I know that you vetted that experience closely before you entered into it and before you committed to it, because you wanted to make sure that this was the right thing and it was going to be effective. Do you mind just sharing a little, just if you don't mind, I don't want to go too far off topic here, but the work that you all are doing really to kind of address some of these more difficult, sticky issues, clearly that you've experienced personally?
Absolutely. I'm happy to. I think that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Board at Advantage is such a bold and courageous move for a company this size to take on. And Advantage is our parent company. I work for Waypoint, and to be able to serve on that inaugural board is absolutely an honor, and I will see that as a highlight of my career. But I can tell you, everything I have been through to this moment has prepared me to be, a high functioning part of this board. And it's funny because the board teases me. We get on video conference once a week, and a couple of them will be like, Julie, you're always smiling. Gosh, what is it? No more, knock it off. Just stop smiling. But it is. And it's because I am doing what I was created to do. When I am in that zone, this is what I was created to do. And that is, to bring others along, to bring other women along, to bring people of color along, to bring LGBTQ plus folks along, Asian people. I mean, this is really about understanding how it is to be in an inclusive work environment, how it is to be accepted as an equal in all spaces. And our CEO and President, Tanya Domeyer, has made it really clear. There is no room for racism of any kind. There is no room for microaggressive behavior. There is no room for everyone to not be able to bring your authentic self and be your authentic self in this space where everyone is respected and everyone is honored. And you think about that, there are all these little side angles of people that don't even realize they are functioning this way or they're thinking this way. So obviously, vibrant training program in place, employee resource groups being set up in this space where people can, be part of a women's group or be part of a disabled veterans group or be part of a working parents group who are schooling kids at home right now. So it really is about being able to connect with people, but more than anything, for everyone to feel equal and to know they can bring their best forward. And here's what we know. We know that we benefit personally from that, and we know the business benefits from that. So that idea of inclusivity, and just think about the difference if, I'm over here with a group of women who look exactly like me, and we're all talking about something, and someone who's different, maybe a different gender, or maybe from a different generation, or maybe from a different ethnicity or a different background, all of a sudden now you get this different perspective. And it's kind of like, this is where the gold happens, this is where, and then I think once you can be a part of that, you can be, wow, I didn't have to lose anything. I didn't have to give up anything.
Yep.
I gained something, and everybody gained something, and the business gained something. So I give major props to my company for being willing to say, we're not where we should be. We recognize it. We're going to do something about it. And really, this was all in place. It started around the first of the year. But obviously, when things started to unfold with, just heavily charged society and social issues around racism, and at the same time, you got this major pandemic coming down on us, all of this happening, we really escalated the process to get more people involved sooner. And I could not be more excited to be part of that and to think in some small way, helping move that agenda forward and helping bring people into more equal and inclusive workspaces. We spend a lot of our time at work. We really do. And I can't help but think too, Josh, I always think about, you can't impact people at work without really impacting them at home. Mm-hmm. And so what are we doing for communities? What are we doing for societies? Like, we're doing something, and that is better than doing nothing. So, I would challenge people, get involved, be a part of the way you want to see your company become, or you want to see your country become. So it's a big deal.
Thanks so much. I've been taking some notes here, and usually in our social media we like to put a lot of quotes in, or at least one quote. I'm gonna have a hard time choosing a quote, to be honest, from this conversation, because you've given me so much. I really appreciate your CEO's mandate and making this, coming from the top, saying that this is important to us as an organization, as a company, and so people tend to listen. And I think that's a form of great leadership right there.
Thank you.
The other piece that I love is you nailed something. You put a fine point on something, or at least maybe highlighted it when you said that it's not about, we don't have to lose anything. In fact, there's more here to gain from this experience, from having more diversity, from having more points of view. I mean, we know in my world of academics, peer-reviewed articles that have diverse groups of people who write these articles and research projects and blind reviews get better ratings. There's just a better product, right? And so we know this in companies as well, and in other examples where you have a wide group of people with varying viewpoints, but all focused on the same mission. That's the piece that brings them together. But they may approach it in different ways, and you can get so much more from that experience. And that individually, too, we have so much to gain rather than to lose. I think that points to a fear that if I give up space for this, or if I make this a priority of bringing other people along, whether it's women or minorities or LGBT folks or people with disabilities, what am I giving up? That's the wrong way of looking at it. It sounds like you're really challenging us and challenging people to flip that and turn that on its head. Don't ask what I'm going to lose. Ask what I'm going to gain from this experience, because that's exactly what's going to happen. The research bears it out. Your experience bears it out. And I really do hope that people who are in leadership roles who are listening to this are really paying attention to it. That's a very powerful message. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so we're going to take a little bit of a break here, and then we're going to jump into the big question.
I can't wait.
It just takes a minute. And all you know can go away once the darker switch becomes yesterday. Because it's just a...
All right. As you know, this is the Best Worst Thing podcast. And so, Julie, of course, this is the time where we ask our guests to share a story, whether it's a personal or professional story, where there was a setback. And the way we ask that people share about this is the what happened, how did you work through it? What was your way of kind of resolving whatever the issue was? And then the what again, what did you learn from that experience that you could pass on to listeners? So Julie Swift, what was your best, worst thing?
I love how you set that up, man. I can tell you've asked that question a bunch of times.
I have.
Yeah, it really does get to the heart of it. And, I won't apologize for the fact that it still upsets me to talk about it. It wasn't a moment. It was a series of, I want to say, sacrifices to who I am. So what I started to realize when I started to go for elevated roles, I started to go for that manager role, that leader role, managing people role, the trajectory was steep, way, more steep than my male counterparts. And that's just the truth of the matter. So in that, I started to adjust and see ways, honestly, to sort of act like my male counterparts. Like, hey, there are things I need to do. I need to be able to, slug down a beer in 5 minutes, or I need to be able to play golf. I do enjoy playing golf. I need to be able to do the guy things so that I can be seen as an equal. And, whether it was one day I woke up or one day I realized, but it was a shameful moment for me that I realized how far I had moved away from who I really was, like from my authentic self. It was almost like I was apologizing for being a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, some examples would be, I would, laugh at things that really weren't funny, that maybe objectified women. I would not speak about something that today you would get the sentence half out of your mouth before I would tell you to put it back in. You know?
Yeah.
But I was afraid. I lived in fear that I would make a move as a woman that would set me back. And that if I was really my true self, my authentic self, I am a goofball, Josh. I'll tell you right now, anyone who works for me knows I'm a goofball. I digress. I walked into my office the other day. I had my team on the meeting, and I had kombucha. And I'd never drank it before, but one of my people told me, like, this, you got to try this. It's so good. So I pick up the bottle and I start shaking it because I notice there is sediment on the bottom.
Right.
And I take the top off of that thing, and let me just tell you, and I can see Mariah, one of the people that work, and she's trying to tell me, she's giving me signals, she's trying to tell me, and I think she's raising her hand to say something. And I mean, it sprayed everywhere. So I just said, look, guys, you know I'm a goofball. I'm the person who spills the tea in the restaurant. I'm just a goofball. But I wasn't comfortable ever being a goofball. I wasn't comfortable being the best version of my authentic self, and it gets exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting to be an imposter to what you think you're supposed to be. Then there's kind of this other side of it that says, ooh, you can't say the same things a man says, because then people will think you're the B word. Or, oh, you can't roll over. People be, she's just too soft. It's like the every moment you're adjusting and thinking and analyzing what you're saying and doing. And at one moment you finally just become exhausted by it, and you realize those who don't accept you are not accepting you anyway, even though you're doing your best, to be that. And I was at the Women's Food Service Forum here a few years ago, and WFF is just a great organization, mentorship and all kinds of things for the food service industry. Lots of greats have spoken there. Michelle Obama spoke there one year. It was just incredible. But it really is about bringing women along. And one of the executive leadership trainings that I had the benefit of being part of was a woman who had spent part of her career on Wall Street. And she was hilarious. She was a Black female with literally, just like when there were no females, much less a Black female. And, she kind of grabbed her waistband and, I had to kind of act like this in order, it's kind of like,
oh, no.
And then she's the one who really made me realize that you ain't fooling anybody,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that event happened. And then another event happened where all of my male counterparts that were at my same level in the organization were invited to a retreat by a leader, and I wasn't invited. And I wasn't invited because I'm a woman. And, whether that's the risk, nobody took the time to say, hey, Julie, we can't invite you to this because, company policy or what, I don't know, make something up. But you don't just leave it. And it just really made me realize, what are you doing here? Like, you don't gain one thing from, putting this on. So the minute I was able to get rid of that, that's when my career really started to excel. Oof. That's when it really started to go, because I am unapologetically me. And I bring my A game every day. I'm going to give you 100% if I work with or for you. But I will not fake it. I will not be something I am not. And, that while I'm really happy that happened, Josh, gosh, I wish I would have learned it sooner. I wish I would have figured it out sooner. I mean, it's just when I think back on it, I cringe. Yeah. I cringe. But, as I mentor women, both in my industry and outside my industry, this is one of the first things I say, don't do that. Don't do that. Get into yourself, have confidence in yourself, believe in yourself. And you know what? If a company doesn't appreciate, then leave. Go somewhere where they will appreciate you. And the words leave are scary. You can almost hear on the other end of the phone, it's like,
Yeah.
It's like, what? Leave? No, you got this. Go for it. So that's my best, worst moment.
Thank you so much. The series of moments where you look back at who that person was, and that not really being Julie Swift, that being some version of you that was maybe you assumed would be more palatable. But the point where you realize that no matter what, if they were not accepting this fake version of you, and they were not going to accept the real version of you. And so maybe there was a bigger decision that you needed to make, because it sounds like there was a lot of problems within that situation overall. Those cringy moments, I think back, I remember one of my first jobs I interviewed for out of grad school. I remember answering the questions in the way I thought the person wanted to hear the answer, like trying to answer right versus answering myself. And after going through a series of interviews, I think the first one was the most, that stands out the most. I got worn down and tired, and I said, forget this. And I remember I just started answering questions based on my experiences and my beliefs and my thinking, and feeling way more comfortable, feeling less exhausted, and also getting a lot more opportunities. And there's a lot of people, I'm certain, who've gone through that moment or moments in their lives where they've thought, I need to appeal to the larger group or to the crowd and not be authentically me. And it is exhausting. You mentioned it perfectly. It's exhausting to be an imposter. You can't keep that up forever. What you can keep up forever is you, and that you're good enough. And it's the demonstration of this again is when you were your career excelled. I mean, that's just
100%,
amazing.
100%. We were talking about the DE&I board, and each of us shared our stories. And I think I talked to you about this sort of when you and I first chatted. But we found out just a few days before we went live with our kind of announcement of DE&I and all of that we would all be part of that discussion and encouraged to tell our stories. And so I really told a shortened version of that story. And at the end of all of us speaking across the 7 board members, Tanya said, Julie, that happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
The men were always, going on these jaunts or they were invited to, drinks after work or whatever it would be. And I was never invited. And, you look back on that, were those bad people? No, they're just not aware, they were just not. And so I think it happens to a lot of women. It probably happens to a lot of people in general of all types of minorities and diversities. But if I can impact somebody learning that sooner than I did, yes. I really want to do that. I really do.
Well, you just did. And I hope on a large scale with the listeners that we're going to get for this episode, the idea that you tell young professionals or whoever you talk with, don't do that. Like, really be you is a way you can do it on a singular level. But it's a powerful message that I think a lot of people need to hear, of being yourself. And we're not saying, the way you talk with your friends at a bar is how you should talk at work. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying that there's multiple dimensions of you, and be the you that you are, that you need for the workplace. But don't try to be, sorry about that, don't try to be something that you're not connected to, to organizational culture or anything else. And so I think it's a very, very powerful message. And I really appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely. I mean, Josh, here's the other thing. You brought up culture in that, but we don't look for people that fit our culture. We look for people that are going to make our culture better.
There you go.
And it's not about fitting a set of rules. And when you come in, gosh, you need to fit this. No, it's about what's going to perpetuate it. What's going to make it better? What's going to, invigorate everyone and where everyone can feel included and equal. So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I brought that up, because I do think that a lot of people hire to culture. Are they a culture fit? Or how many times have you heard, oh, my gut just told me, that's your bias.
Yes.
That's not your gut. That's your bias. So bring it in the light, get it out there. We all have unconscious bias. Everybody does. Just get it out there. Don't ever unsee what you've seen and move it forward.
It's in us all, but I hope that anybody senior leadership roles, making important decisions, whether it's hiring at any level, considers that last bit of feedback and advice that you gave, which is it's not about fitting into your culture, which again, even the idea of fit could be another form of being a gateway. This person's not really a good fit for us, but that's not what you're encouraging people to do. You're looking for people to enhance and improve and advance your culture, which is incredible. Very powerful. Well, Julie, listen, I want to say again, thank you so much for doing this. I know that you are super busy, and it means so much to me that you took some time to share with people your story and your powerful message. I have a tendency to write down quotes and store them in my phone on a document, and I tend to steal them. I'll give you credit, but I appreciate it. If people want to connect with you or with Waypoint, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, through LinkedIn is fine. I'm Julie Swift on LinkedIn, but all of my information is there. You can contact me privately, or you can go to the asmwaypoint.com website, and both my email and my phone number are there on the leadership page.
That's great. Well, thank you for being so generous, and always, I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Josh Walewa. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at Boomnote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cool Jets Audio and Visual. You can follow them at Cool Jets AV on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to The Best Worst Thing.
This one's for the good times and this one's for the bad. This one's for the day.